And good morning, Alan, and welcome to Loyalty Leader Insights. Well, good afternoon, I should say, in the UK. How's it going over there?
Glorious sunshine.
Excellent.
That we can enjoy as long as we only meet one other person from another household, which suits me fine, frankly.
So you've locked yourself in the office and basically said you're the only other person you're going to meet in the household. Is that right?
That's it, yeah. I've locked myself in the office and told the family that I'm on a very important call with a very important person.
So
pretending I still have a role in the world.
I'm grateful to have been invited to join you with that. So Jason's connecting in. He was having some connection difficulties there in Hong Kong. So hopefully he's going to connect in okay. But welcome to this week's Loyalty Leader Insights. And so this week's topic is a very interesting topic. Are status levels and partnership deals broken, and what can program managers do? And what we want to explore this week is, not just focusing on the crisis that's happening right now, but thinking more generally. I mean, in the last 5-10 years, loyalty has really gone on a generational level evolution in terms of loyalty programs. It wasn't just the domain of those frequent corporate travelers who the average person couldn't relate to. I mean, now frequent travel loyalty programs are embedded, in society, at every level, whether you are a once-a-year flyer, a once every 2-year flyer, or you're on a plane every day. There is there is some connection, across that whole spectrum of the consumer base, whether your engagement is simply earning some points when you shop at the supermarket, or, you are that traditional frequent traveler. So we wanted to talk about status and partnership deals because it really touches kind of every aspect. It's not just about earning some points or miles and then redeeming them for free flights anymore. So I almost want to put that earning points and redeeming them for free flights, I want to kind of wrap that up in a little bow and put that to the side for today's discussion. Alan, what I might do is just, if you want to take 30 seconds, briefly introduce yourself and sort of give us your take on sort of where we are today, when we think about, status, partnerships, loyalty programs.
Hello, everybody. And I'm Alan Lias, delighted to be here today. Delighted to be anywhere today, frankly. And just a little bit about me. I started my career at American Express, worked in the card business, other areas, commercial areas of American Express for about 10 years. Spent about 7 years in the energy business, did a bit of management consulting, and then ended up at Virgin Atlantic, where I was there for 12 years running loyalty and ancillaries. Left there at the end of 16, and since beginning of 17, I've been running my own loyalty consultancy, still working with a lot of airlines, but working across different industry types. And of course, the great thing about the work I'm lucky enough to do and be involved with, I guess, listen, I mean, we have to go right back. And if we start maybe with the US airline business, we have to go right back to the bottom line, which is airlines have found it really hard to make money, full stop. The cumulative losses before COVID of the airline industry around the world and in the US in particular are well documented, notwithstanding now there's been some rationality and consolidation in the US in particular. You've got some very healthy businesses there making very, very healthy profits. However, they're still down from the beginning of time. And actually, a focus on profitability has driven so much in terms of how airlines have reacted. We've seen the beginning of in 2008 when I think United were the first full service airline to introduce bag for fees. I mean, ancillaries has been a great way you look at it. If you do it well as an airline, you make more money and drive NPS. If you do it badly, you disenfranchise. And so loyalty has been the biggest ancillary. And at the same time, we look at status. There's been some hard-nosed decisions about who do you really want to look after. And I guess it's been driven by the money. And if you look at who led this, in particular, Delta, when they went revenue-based, I think everybody accepts, even people in Delta, I would imagine, would probably give this some sympathy, is they perhaps over-rewarded super elite members or super high users. Diamond members, 11 miles per dollar spent, is huge. And as a result of that massive investment, understandably in chasing front of plane customers with the highest margins, what you've ended up doing is putting a huge amount of pressure, if you like, on the cost base around those elite programs. And so what they've had to do is make it harder for loyal, traditionally loyal people to achieve status. And even the programs themselves, okay, at the super elite levels, there's some good value there. But US programs, unlike European or rest of the world programs, for example, only give lounge access when you get to the top tier. So there's been, if you like, a much more bottom line focus to how status is rewarded, with no real regard to the members' share of wallet, with no real regard to the frequency of that customer. They don't set the fares, for example, and with, I suppose, little regard to the valuable customers that are in the mix and the ex-elites who, the minute you don't quite perform as to what you're expected to, you dump back in the lowest tier. And so I think it's understandable how this bottom line focus has driven where we are. So I think the creative thing going forward will be, how do you get a sweet spot between really helping your customers make a decision to pick you, really focused on, if you like, your personal share of wallet, and what can airline elite programs do, and programs generally do, to win, frankly, a bigger share of a smaller wallet. Because whatever happens, it's going to be 2, 3, 4 years before we get back to 2019 levels. That's with discounting the effect of the environment. Flight shaming was already very large and big, and it's playing on people's consciences. So this idea of, when I say a sweet spot, how do we, the airline industry, really, really look to reward loyalty at an elite level, a recognition level, as well as at a transactional level, to deliver much more value to customers that are giving you, and hopefully have a reason to give you, a bigger share of their spend.
Wow, there's a lot of stuff in there, Alan, and I think you've probably landed about half a dozen different topics there, all of which are fascinating. I want to put a couple of them to the side for a moment, because later in the conversation, I want to come back and I want to pick your brains on, some of the more perhaps less traditional strategies that program managers might want to start thinking about now, given that background that you just kind of walked us through. And I think it's good to have a think about not just the challenges of today. And when I say challenges today, I mean both the current crisis, but also just even if we go back a few months pre-crisis, and we could talk today being just where programs find themselves at the beginning of 2020. It's easy for us to get distracted, I think, by the current crisis. We shouldn't ignore it, and we certainly shouldn't ignore the fact that the recovery isn't going to be a reset back tomorrow to 2019 levels of flying activity and revenue for airlines. And I think that that's an important call out. Just today, there was some information coming out from Delta, for example. In the US market, they're starting to see, that, the airline revenue looks like it still has a pulse, but we shouldn't extrapolate from that, the recovery is underway and tomorrow everything's going to be hunky-dory, because it's simply, both of those are just simply false. It's too early. The recovery has not started yet. What we are seeing is that artificial depression where travel purchase activity was really below the lowest level it really should have ever have got to. And it's resetting slightly now to a minimal baseline level. I saw some commentary the other day, which I think is quite plausible, that, there's a lot of people that have cabin fever right now, and if they're not restricted by their companies to staying home, and if their clients are still willing to see them, which in a lot of cases they're not, but even just leisure travelers, there's some people that are going to be like, you know what, I want to get out of the house. I want to get out of the apartment. I need to go and see some sick relatives that I haven't been able to go and visit. So that VFR, that visiting friends and relatives traffic, obviously there's going to be a portion of that. Some people are just like, you know what? I could get hit by a bus walking across the road. Their personal risk tolerance and appetite says to them, I'm okay to travel right now. And there's going to be some of those traditional road warriors, those weekly travelers that are just like, you know what? I live in a shoebox because I didn't invest in a large place to live because I'm always on the road. I'm going stir crazy. I need to get out. All those people are going to get on the road relatively quickly, but whether they stay on the road, whether their budgets, and particularly for the business travelers, whether the clients are there for them to see them, the clients are open, the clients are willing to see them, and there's that revenue stream for them. Otherwise, if those stars don't all align, there's no revenue for the airlines. But I want to just go back to pick up on one point that you mentioned, and it's very easy for us to always talk about US airlines and the US market in aviation. I mean, it's always been the way. It will always be the way in the future. But I want to spend a little bit of time in the discussion focusing on the rest of the world, on Asia Pacific, on Canada, or Australia, on Europe, and the way that the US airlines, Delta, American, do things, whilst they might be carbon copies of themselves or, 99% carbon copies of each other, that's not necessarily the case around the world. But what we do often see, especially nowadays, is we do see airlines, international airlines around the world. We often see the CFO knocking on the loyalty program manager's door and saying, hey, Delta and United American are doing this. Why aren't we doing what they're doing? Whether it's baggage fees, whether it's basic economy, whether it's revenue-based earning structures, and some of these ideas aren't necessarily, the worst ideas in the world if they're implemented right. And you touched on that earlier, and you said if you get it right, it's fine, it works, you generate revenue. If you get it wrong, you basically you annoy your entire customer base. But when we think about status, and I said at the beginning of the conversation, let's put points and miles to the side. When we think about status, you really spend a bit of time talking about share of wallet. And if I think about you, Alan, and you travel a bit under normal circumstances, some of that might be funded by clients.
Yeah, I've been in the kitchen earlier on today.
You were in the kitchen earlier on today.
That was a great trip.
That was a great trip, and I'm going to guess that it was a personal discretionary trip. You didn't have to go to the kitchen; you chose to do so. Yeah, you made the. There we go. But when a traveler has their own discretion as to do they travel, where do they travel economy, do they travel first class, and which airline do they travel on? We really do need to think about both share of wallet and frequency in terms of those additional discretionary trips. Do I want to go and visit some friends and relatives this weekend, or am I going to just pick up the phone or, FaceTime with them? If we think about discretionary travel and share of wallet, the whole idea of status is to, like you rightly say, those people that are spending big dollars at the front of the plane, you want to look after them. And even when they're on managed corporate contracts, and a couple of weeks ago, we spoke about managed corporate travelers versus leisure travelers or self-funded travelers. But even those travelers can sometimes influence corporate decisions in terms of which airline they contract with, or some travelers play games with corporate policy. Yeah. There is some level of influence. So there's nothing wrong with airlines and hotels looking after their highest spending customers. But what about that level below? I always refer to them as the mid-tiers, the golds in most programs. These are people who don't fly enough to be super top tier, or maybe they just scrape in. But they have discretion over who they make their airline selection with, and they might be worth $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year, depending, whether we're talking Australian dollars or quid or US dollars, doesn't really matter. So a sizable volume of customers at a sizable spend per customer. We want to make sure that the status program is relevant to them in terms of both dangling the carrot in front of them, so that they will continue to, stay on the hamster wheel if they've already got status. But even if they don't, that they aspire to it. And if we think about non-US programs, you get to mid-tier status, it comes with lounge access. You get those things that make travel easier, the priority security, the priority check-in. We remove all those friction points. But if you overinvest in those top tiers at the expense of those mid and lower tiers, I mean, in the data that you've been working with, Alan, I mean, what are the effects that you're sort of seeing there? And I know you touched on what if they don't requalify, they fall right to the bottom. But even to the fact that lack of investment now in those, I'm going to call them those self-funded mid-tiers, what sort of impacts have you seen as we've seen a number of airlines go in that direction?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting set of questions, because the way an airline historically or currently even look at the mid tiers, that's a journey towards the higher tier. That's the ultimate goal as far as the program manager is concerned, the airline's concerned. So you have to make the entry level tier, the next level tier, meaningful enough to be aspirational, but at the same time, you don't want to make them too good. And you touched upon what are they delivering? I guess under the two umbrellas of less pain, more pleasure. How do we make the airport experience better? How do we make the onboard experience better? And I think one of the really, I suppose, difficult balances that a program manager has to make on this is to figure out what they're going to invest per customer segment. So they have to understand their customers. They have to understand the value of those customers, future value, current value. They also, intriguingly, have to understand how much it really costs to deliver on the loyalty benefits. How expensive is a priority bag? How expensive is a free bag? How expensive is priority boarding? How expensive is a lounge? Slightly more obvious, I guess. And any other, preferred, queuing on passport control. All these elements of cost. Now, I think to be really good at understanding your costs as a program manager is critical, because it gives you credibility internally as well as enable you to make better investments. And you rightly said at the beginning of this conversation, let's park up the earning and redemption piece. But I would wager there are not that many airlines that have really understood the relationship, the economic relationship, and presented that economic relationship in a fair way that balances member needs, airline needs, program needs. You've got many airlines that, for example, have big partner businesses, small partner businesses. You've got many airlines that go to partner negotiations and won 2 cents a mile, and ones that won 75 basis points a mile, fundamentally with the same business models. So I think part of the challenge is as well, and I'd urge, this is a moment for reflection, I would urge program managers to not only continue the ongoing quest to essentially figure out what displacement costs are from a revenue perspective of the program, so they can figure out proper transfer pricing mechanisms for miles, but do something similar with the elite programs. And one of the things I think we're going to see coming through is an application of what airlines have learned through monetization of ancillaries to loyalty. And so today I can customize my flight experience either by a fare bundle, or I can buy a basic fare and a la carte services, or I can buy a bundle and add 1 or 2 additional services to it. So what we're doing with, I guess, if overall the airline's goal is to differentiate itself, by offering paid services, it not only enables airlines to differentiate and give economics around differentiation, but it makes a profit. And as we said, the beautiful thing about ancillaries is, and this is pretty much proven across the board, you buy an ancillary, you're giving the airline more money, you love that airline more, you drive the airline NPS. So the program itself needs to be looked at. It is an ancillary in that mileage sales are an ancillary and the largest. But if you took the ancillary lens and applied that to your tier program, so you mentioned the mid-tier, the gold. Why can't I customize my gold? Why can't I have gold plus I'm going to pay $99 or £99 or 99 euros and I get something else? Why can't I, on the way down, before I get dumped back into the basic level, why can't I elect to customize that ongoing experience for a fee? And I think the fee you pay for that needs to be carefully calibrated, but the fee you pay needs to reflect your previous relationship and your future value. And so you may have, if you were starting an airline loyalty program today, if I was, I would not have 3 tiers. I would have paid 4 tiers, 1, 2, 3, 4, doesn't matter how many tiers. And each one of those payments gives me better value. I may, however, be able to waive the payment based on whatever my behavior is. So if I fly a lot, if I interact with partners a lot, if I carry a co-brand, essentially I get to a point where the economics are so attractive to me as a customer, I get it for free. And the great thing about doing it that way is, if you're starting from scratch, you wouldn't need to be where we are today, which is, oh, crikey, I've got to look after these super value customers. I've got to cross-subsidize them with the poor old base members that are being really busy with partners. That's where a lot of money's coming from. It's all partner. But elite tier benefits are paid for by partners indirectly, let's be honest. But at least when I presented the new solution, I'd be able to say to the airline, look, economics in the elite program, economics in the base program, and I achieved that through enabling members to customize that experience. We've seen clumsy versions of that, tactical versions of that, which are okay. You can buy top-up tier points if you're on the cusp. Very clumsy is to sell elements of the tier program, like just selling your own lounge, is a dangerous game because it alienates those people that have qualified for it. And the idea of selling the elite tier full stop is a dangerous game. Okay, you can sell it at a very high price and maybe that helps positioning. But this idea of reskinning the elite programs to understand what you've learned as airlines in the ancillary space, to understand actually what the programs have already learned from interacting with partners. How can we structure things in a completely different way that give me what I want? So the mid-tier member could get the good stuff if they're prepared to pay. I'll give the best analogy I can think of, completely different industry, is if I buy a 1 Series BMW, I can have as much kit in it as I'd get in a 7 Series BMW that costs 10 times as much. I might have to pay an extra $10,000, $15,000 to get the kit, but that's my choice. And that's almost, I think, where airlines need to start thinking about how they transition from super compensating a smaller and smaller bunch of people to actually making a much more ancillary play. But of course, the pricing is therefore hugely important. If I go back to my American Express days, how you price, American Express card to produce is about 3 cents, unless you get a titanium one, is a lot more. The price of that product up to $2,500 if it's a Centurion product. That pricing is so fundamentally important how you do that. But the great thing about airline elite or future elite strategies is that price point. There can be more than one price point. There's the price point for anybody rocking up, but there's the price point for you because you're loyal, you've been previously loyal, and you're interacting us in a different way. Already I'm feeling good and I'm giving you money. And so that money then will drive potentially a much better through the airport and onboard experience because there's economics to back that up. And if we believe that people will fly less, and I think it's obvious they will fly less because of COVID-19, but if we believe that getting to 2019 levels of flying is a 3 or 4 year thing away at least, we've got an opportunity now to really do what airlines are really good at, which is apply an ancillaries lens to the loyalty elite proposition.
I want to pivot slightly here. I mean, my big passion is about the behavioral aspect of the elite program. So, you mentioned earlier about, you've got to be very careful about not messing with your lounges, by monetizing your lounges for single entry, or clumsily offering, $3,000 to rebuy your status that you're going to lose this year, where you might actually offend your members more than actually generate revenue. It's a very, very fine balance. There's no doubt about that. But one of the things that I think is just always imperative to remember is if status is working right, it's incentivizing customers to actually to give you greater share of wallet, to give you that extra flight, to stretch over and above what they actually would have done. And I think that is sometimes forgotten, when we're thinking about, as you say, we're not starting from scratch with the greenfield design of a program. We're inheriting these programs and these elite bases and these old systems. And when we think about systems, you made a comment earlier about customers don't set the fare. And again, I said earlier about, we sometimes focus too much on the US programs, but and there's a lot of things to criticize in the way the US programs are currently designed. There's a lot of things to criticize about the old way they were designed. So let's talk about non-US programs, about how status works. In a number of programs outside of the US, status traditionally wasn't earned by simply flying, 100,000 miles during the year. You had tier credit tables or status credit tables And the idea was, the more you flew, yes, you earned more status. But if you flew in more expensive cabins, if you flew in premium economy or business or first, you earned more status. You earn status faster. So you're either going to achieve it faster or at the end of the year, reach a higher level. You'll be platinum instead of gold, for example, or you'll be gold instead of silver. For you to actually achieve top level status simply by buying the cheapest discount fares down the back of the plane week in, week out, you know what? If you're somebody who actually managed to do that, good luck to you. You deserve top tier status because you're probably going to be paying for a chiropractor for the rest of your life. So, outside of the US, it wasn't just, you couldn't just buy the cheapest fare, to Europe or Asia and fly 100,000 miles and get top tier. So that's not how it works. And that's not how it worked. But the reality was, it didn't matter if the fare was $50 or it was $100 or next week it was $250 and then the week after it was $50 again, because the customer doesn't set the fare. What the customer does is choose whether I'm going to fly next week and which airline I'm going to fly on. And I'm going to buy whichever fare I'm going to buy. If it's coming out of my own wallet or my company has a best fare of day policy or specific fare buckets they're contracted into buying, they're going to buy those fare buckets. And if it's $50 this week and $100 next week, it doesn't really, it doesn't really matter to the customer because they don't control that. And status credit or tier credit earning tables as the method of calculating how a member earns status is, agnostic to the fare in that sense. The airline can price it as per market dynamics, and all the customer is doing is choosing, look, if I need to take a flight next week, and I see in the comments, Peter makes a big comment, a big call out here about, well, hang on a minute, extra unnecessary flights, in the era of flight shaming. I mean, I think it's an important call out. But if you're going to travel, for whatever reason, you have personal reasons to travel, you have business reasons to travel, you have a choice to make in terms of which airline you fly. And you also have a choice to make about whether you do get on a plane to go have a business meeting versus whether you get on the phone. And, hey, we had some technical difficulties today. Video conferencing is not the all-out solution. Business travel is not completely dead, although it's going to have a bigger impact than it had in previous crises. When we switch to the kind of what is now the US model, where status is determined simply by how much you spend, you have these minimum spend levels for each status level. And we're getting stratospheric at the top tier status now, $15,000, $18,000, $24,000 US dollars to achieve top tier status now. And that's all well and good if we go back to January of 2020, right? Airlines have been doing well for a number of years. The economy is going well. Business travel's on the way up. We're really, certainly in hindsight, we're at the peak of corporate business travel revenue. But what happens in a deflationary airfare environment? I mean, you said it's going to be a few years before we get back to the levels that we were at beforehand. If airfares are coming down, and Alan, you're flying the same amount, week in, week out, you're commuting between your workplaces, exactly the same as you've done for the last 3 years, and for the next 3 years, you continue to do so exclusively on your home preferred airline. But because airfares have dropped, your total spend has dropped. But that's no fault of yours. If the airline wants to charge more, they should go back to charging the fares they were doing before. They can't because of market dynamics and market economics. Should that be on the customer? Should you, as a member who's been loyal, giving 100% of your share of wallet, should you now be relegated to losing your elite status because you're doing the same behavior? It's just the airline doesn't have the pricing power that it used to have before. So my two questions to you are, you've got a status credit or tier credit type way of earning status, which is a bit more opaque in terms of the airfare. Or you've got just minimum spend, but the problem is in an inflationary airfare environment, customers achieve higher levels of status for the same flying. In a deflationary, they achieve less. My second question is, bring it back to your approach about ancillaries, and how does that tie in there?
I mean, it's very frustrating for people that are loyal. And okay, I mean, there's another level as well, which is who's actually paying for the fare. And business travel often is paid for by an organisation, but often it's a big corporate maybe, but often the organisation is actually the flyer's organisation. So that person is trying to optimize their T&E budget, and at the same time, which probably necessitates therefore lower cost flying, they potentially get penalised for not hitting the revenue threshold. and actually what's happening now is quite interesting, because there's sort of two buckets of responses in terms of COVID-19 and how elite programs are looking at it. You've got a bunch of airlines that are giving you more time, but effectively expecting you to do the same thing in terms of future renewal, albeit most airlines have done the right thing and extended, some 3 months, some 6 months, some 12 months. But post that extension period, some airlines are saying you've got another year on top of that to get elite, whereas others are just reducing the criteria. And we figure out who's doing what and why. The airlines that are most dominant and are most monopolistic, are going down the road of extension of time rather than less spent. So the clue there potentially for those loyal back of the plane road warriors, for want of a better phrase, or those infrequent leisure front of the plane customers and everybody in between, it's a real dilemma, because programs don't want to not recognize loyalty. And if you do one holiday a year and it's with an airline, and you do that every year, you've got 100% of that person's leisure long haul. It is a long haul holiday, for example, which is typically only once a year if you're lucky. You've got 100%. So question, what do you do about that? How do you do that? And I think there's one option, you just be nice to everybody, and of course that's not economic. There's another option, which is you look at the total relationship that you have with that customer. And to be fair, we've seen increasingly airlines with co-brands enabling co-brand spend to qualify for status. In the end, you've got a customer with a branded airline product presenting it nearly every day of the week, maybe every day of the week. So loyal, potentially spending a lot more on the co-brand than they spend on the airline, of their own money usually. There are business co-brands, but the vast majority of co-brands in the marketplace are consumer. And most of the spend is on consumer. And these people maybe haven't been recognized. So maybe part of the opportunity is to have a dialogue with your customers to say, look, let's look at the total relationship. So on the ground and in the air. And let's make sure we're properly recognizing and rewarding that. So I might be a back of the aircraft flyer, but I might be a heavy co-brand spender. Put the two together and I'm back in the game. I'm back where I should be, potentially at the front of the plane. Now we've seen, United and American, actually one of their responses is this situation is to increase the opportunity to earn tier points through credit card spend. In fact, I think if you spend $120,000 on your American Airlines Visa card, I think you can achieve platinum status. So it's a lot of money, but it's absolutely the right thing to do. I remember when we launched, I think it was Virgin Atlantic, this is 2008 actually, it was just before the banking crisis. We launched co-brand in the US. We include tier points in that because we wanted to be the first, but actually we structured it so the behavior to get to gold, you couldn't just spend a lot of money in one go. You had to spend every month to build the tier points, and you had to do 1.5 business class flights, roughly, 4 economy flights, and you got there. Now, that was a long time ago, and we haven't seen that necessarily developed further. But this total relationship, I think, is where we need to get to. And you mentioned the ancillary point as well. And that includes what else am I spending with the airline. So if I'm buying ancillaries, if I'm upgrading my experience in some shape or form, not cabin upgrade, but I'm doing more, I would times X ancillary spend on the airline, because the margins are fantastic on ancillaries, because essentially you're in business anyway. And you're monetizing and optimizing the revenue take per flight flown. Whether it's, obviously they're 100% full, fair enough, but even in a 100% full environment, you've got seating choices, windows, aisles, there's a whole bunch of opportunity there. So really factor that in too. And so it's the total relationship. And then that will help you. I mean, we're going to touch upon partners later on in this conversation, but that will also help you consolidate your relationship with partners. And that will help you win a bigger share of the partner opportunity there is. You mentioned Europe as well, and I apart from the US, and I know I've just been talking about the US. I mean, one of the great schemes that are out there, even though they used to be the arch enemy when I was at Virgin Atlantic, is the Executive Club. Because what they've really got right, all right, they're dominant, so they're in good shape. They're going to get a lot of transactions. The gold status, which gifts upgrades in a very, very clever way. You can't second guess or third guess how you're going to get an upgrade, but you know if you fly 3 or 4 times in economy or especially in premium, you're going to get an upgrade. Mm-hmm. You can game it a little bit, pick a flight that isn't going to be full at the front, and BA are doing a cracking job. Their Know Me program, which they spent a load of money on, they made some mistakes with it. They were over recognizing customers at every touch point. It was driving them mad. Now what they do is in a much more subtle way, and many airlines do this, but BA do it really well. And of course, you can extend these. You know, we in the loyalty business, airlines have flirted with this. Many companies have flirted with surprise and delight. It doesn't work at scale. It only works for an elite few or a special few. Yeah. And so surprise and delight, when not even talked about, works brilliantly. And I think back to this total relationship. If we have I've got a co-brand, I do my online shopping through the airline portal, I transfer my retail points into the airline program, I buy an ancillary when I fly, I might buy a hotel through the airline. That needs to all add up to a relationship that that gives me more. I passionately believe in subscription. You know, I mean, the fact we are the founders of loyalty, yet we've let subscription-based loyalty fly in other industries, notably Amazon Prime, but there's many other examples. Off they go, and we haven't taken advantage of that, where we know a lot about price because we've done loads of ancillaries, is madness. But that in itself is also another behavior that can qualify you for this overt, non-opaque experience I'm going to get, plus this surprise and delight opportunity. I think this is the way it needs to go, because if the game ultimately is to win a bigger share of a smaller wallet in the air on the ground, we need to look at those opportunities. Even US carriers could surprise and delight, could gift a gold member a lounge visit, even if that's not part of the deal, unless you've already bought the lounge. And of course, you know, I got gold in Delta, for example. I get a discount on my $700. I get $500. I mean, I'm not feeling that great, but especially given the lounges, you know, they're still working on it. They're a work in progress. They're much better. But again, you know, it's this total relationship. And if I can demonstrate to the airline that I am committed, and the airline is clever enough to figure that out and have a view of me, and we've done. I mean, crikey, I did my marketing degree in 1988 or whatever it was. We were talking about single customer view then. We still haven't got it. We still need it. All right, some people have. Some very clever people have, but not in our space, unfortunately. That single customer view, if we can leverage that and let the customer elect by subscription to some extent, but certainly elect in terms of how they interact with partners to be more valuable, let's back it up. And I think that's the future.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we talk about, the total customer engagement here, I mean, it really comes down to knowing your customers. And it's not just about knowing your flyers that are on the plane, bum in seat every week. And it's interesting. Next week's topic is going to be, I think, is a great follow-up to this, Alan. We've got Mark Ross Smith coming back next week. He's actually going to be hosting a session basically called "What Can Airlines Do with Loyalty Data?" And I think that, you know, I mean, we all talk about it, you know, that we all think that our airlines and our programs are doing great things with data, but the reality is there's so much that we're missing. Now, that said, you know, the opportunity to do so much better, to really try to totally understand that relationship with the customer is there. Just before we pivot to some partnerships, let me do some of the obligatories. I want to remind everybody, loyaltysummit.com. You can watch the replays of our webcasts. You can also register for next week's webcast. That registration will be up shortly as well. And we'll have a follow-up on Travel Data Daily as well with some extra Q&A that we don't get to in the short period that we have today. I want to mention our sponsors, of course, for Loyalty Summit: Engage, People, Amia, Adara, Hilton Honors, who are the official hotel and venue partner for Loyalty Summit in the Americas, Radisson Rewards, who are the official hotel and venue partner for Loyalty Summit in London. And, do keep an eye and follow the Loyalty Summit LinkedIn channel as well, because that'll be the fastest place that we post updates to new topics coming up, and also once the replays are available as well. I want to pivot a little bit to partnerships, Alan. And in terms of status, I mean, we talked about status, you know, about whether overtly rewarding just on dollars spent on flights actually penalizes people who are otherwise 100% loyal to your brand in a deflationary air environment. You've brought up about, well, what about the rest of the total relationship? We've talked a little bit about subscription. And I think to myself, and I think about in other markets, in Canada, in Australia, for example, whilst you might not be directly paying a fee in the sense of like an Amazon Prime membership, but getting the airline co-brand card, and of course, outside the US, airline co-brand cards are very different to how they are in the US traditionally. You have multiple bank issuers issuing them, but you can get or you may have a single bank issuer. In Australia, you can get a Qantas frequent flyer card or a Virgin Australia frequent flyer through multiple banks. The same, with Aeroplan and Air Canada, and for a lot of other major airlines around the world, there are multiple bank relationships, not kind of this single view that you have in the US. But in years gone by, a customer carrying for example, a Qantas branded credit card, having it top of wallet, using it for everything they do in their life. They get in a cab, they go to the grocery store, they go to the pharmacy, they pay for their Netflix subscription. They put petrol or gas in their car. They're using that card for everything, and they consider themselves attached to the brand. They consider that they have a relationship with the brand. They fly once every 2 years to take a family vacation to the beach, but they've only 100% flown that airline for the last 20 years. They've never flown another airline. They don't consider another airline. They may even occasionally, buy a club membership or, I don't know, buy some branded merchandise even. Or in years gone by, bought from the in-flight duty-free. In years gone by, just having that airline co-branded card was almost like a subscription membership in itself, wasn't it? It was self-selecting, even if there was regardless of an annual fee on the card, it was self-selecting. I'm a member of that brand. So when we talk about subscription now as more of an ancillary, is that really more just an extension of kind of how the relationship almost always was? And part of the discussion today, I want to spend our last 2 minutes talking about, are partnerships broken? And we always think about the co-brand partnerships, but when you talk about the total ecosystem and relationship with the customer, we're talking about more than just the co-brand, aren't we?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think depending on the marketplace, especially for fee-based cards, fee-based cards in the US are pretty good value. The annual fees are pretty low. Fee-based cards in Europe tend to be higher cost. And in terms of what they give you, there's been I suppose a creep between what super expensive co-brand cards give you and what the elite program itself gives you. And the best example will be in the US, where you buy the most expensive American Express Delta card and you'll get the lounge. You'll get the same with American, and you'll get the same with United. And that's a $150 fee, and you get a $700 value just in the lounge alone. So it's a bit of a no-brainer for a frequent flyer. However, funny enough, there's still the majority of members don't have the co-brands. But nevertheless, co-brands, I want to talk about this just a bit more on co-brands, and I'll come on to your question about what about other partners. Co-brand members are the most valuable airline customers, full stop. Often elite members have a higher propensity to have a co-brand, but when they become non-elite later down the line, they maintain their co-brands and they continue to spend more than normal members. They spend more than active members, and they buy high yield fares. They're great. And the reason they're attracted to the airline is because ultimately the key assets being offered is travel to lovely destinations. And what a great way to experience the world with hopefully a subsidized flight or a free flight. Now, I think so the opportunity may be there going forward. Subscription, I think, any subscription products the airlines offer need to turbocharge not just through the airport and potentially on board experience, but also need to turbocharge the partner experience. So if I've got a co-brand and I've got a subscription, my co-brand is more valuable. Or if I haven't got a co-brand, then but I've got a subscription, I can enjoy some of the value that elite members enjoy, or I'm used to seeing if I'm an ex-elite member, and I can do it at a preferred price. I think in terms of partners and how this all links in, so you're absolutely right, and I know we're running out of time, but partners probably maybe don't get that airline co-brand members are super valuable to the airline, therefore could be super valuable to the partner itself. Now you're right. Markets like Australia are a bit one-offs. I mean, Qantas is so dominant in that market that it can call the shots. Multiple banks issuing multiple co-brands, and it has just stolen recently the Woolworths relationship from Virgin Australia. The BP relationship, I beg your pardon. And it's huge. But in the rest of the world, where you have less dominance, I would love, as a co-brand member, as a collector of airline points, I'd love to have more value offered to me through partners as well. Because in the end, if we go back to this total relationship, if I'm a Virgin Atlantic co-brand holder and I shop at Tesco's, I'd like something more. To some extent, that started in that you can link cards, but the card link reward business is still in its fledgling state. It hasn't really got the traction yet, even though the proposition is really compelling. But I'd give the best example I'd give would be online spend. So if I go through the airline shop with my co-brand, I sort of double dip because I get the shop points and I get the co-brand points. But when you look at the numbers, and I would urge anybody who sits on a co-brand and sits on an online mile to look at what the share of wallet is of my co-brand members shopping on my own mile. You'd assume that it would be huge, the coverage. All right, in some markets, Amazon is obviously big. You don't get Amazon in Europe on emails, but you get pretty much everybody else. Have a look. And nearly everybody I've looked at and everybody I've spoken to, it's tiny. Co-brand members' share of online spend on their own e-shops is 5 to 15%. So what's missing? I'm a co-brand member and I'm shopping online at a partner, a John Lewis in the UK. I'm going to John Lewis Direct and I'm forgetting to go via the shop. If I go via the shop, I effectively double dip. But actually, if you structure it right, the shop itself has additional value for the co-brand member. A bit like if I go to virginatlantic.com or ba.com or della.com with my co-brand, I get double points. Why don't I get double points when I shop online through my ba.com shop? Why don't I do that? So there's a simple way of slightly starting to bring the partner piece in with the co-brand, in this case, potentially a subscription version and a lead. Because in the end, if we are looking at this total relationship, not only do I triple dip if I shop through the shop, why am I getting it tier points? I mean, Air Canada, you mentioned, they've done a lovely thing recently. As a result of COVID, they've said, if you donate miles, aeroplan miles, to one of our charitable causes, so flying health workers around as holidays, we'll give you a tier point for every 5 you donate. Brilliant. But why isn't that happening everywhere? And so when I'm a partner, my relationship with a partner today is, would you like to be a partner? Yeah. Right, let's set up the transfer files. Here's the value story. Are you up for it? Yeah, go, negotiation, done. But I am not really, and partners like me, because when we do the analysis at the end of the year, we go, look, airline customers have a bigger wallet share, have a bigger basket size, tend to buy higher value products. They're high, travel's not free. They tend to be more valuable mass affluent customers. Why isn't that being brought in to the equation? So when I look at this total relationship idea, Elite needs to touch, the opportunity for Elite needs to touch every touch point that I have. And actually what airlines probably have learned, the ones that have got developed partnership businesses, as a minimum, for me, a minimum is if you're not distributing at least 50% of your points and miles through partners, you've got a suboptimal partner business. It should be 60 to 70%. If you're doing that, you are getting nice cash flow at the moment, even if you're not getting passengers. If you're not doing that, you've got a bigger problem. But actually, if you decide you want to play catch up because you want to enjoy that partner cash flow in the future, why not build in a deeper relationship between your customers and your partners from the off, and start looking at how you can have, if you like, turn this total relationship into reality? Because there is going to be less flying wallet. There is for 3, 4, 5 years, and then in 5 years' time, if it hasn't already happened already, there's going to be a much more awareness about the environment. There'll probably be more people flying. I mean, the middle classes are growing around the world. In developed markets, the Chinese middle classes are growing hugely. But in the developed worlds and the mature markets, we need something new. So I think there's a big opportunity coming along to link all this together.
So, Alan, in a few minutes, we talked a lot, again, we talked a bit about what about status, when status is linked to overtly to money, to spend, in a deflationary airfare environment. Customer, the frequent flyer member is flying the same, but earning less or getting awarded less in terms of status. But when we talk about total partner relationship, we start bringing co-brand as well. But the reality is as well, we are in a recessionary environment. Co-brand spend is down. I saw a figure here published in the US just this week of, I think, one of the major banks is seeing up to a 40% drop in the last 60 days on key travel card spend. We're going to see, obviously, grocery and supermarket spend around the world is up. Clearly spend on travel, whether it's taxis, whether it's Ubers or Grabs or hotels or airlines, clearly is down and is going to be staying down. When we think about co-brand cards, they're travel focused. So even just forget about general economic recessionary, lower household spend. Those particular cards focused on more typically mass affluent spenders are going to be the hardest hit. Now that's going to flow directly to the P&L profitability of loyalty programs because they're going to have reduced income from their co-brand bank partners. So just kind of as we move into our final thoughts, tying that into, again, your total customer relationship, topic that we've been exploring here, but thinking about the fact that flight revenue is going to be down, co-brand card spend is going to be down, overall spend is going to be down. As we finish up, what takeaways can program managers take away from our conversation now in terms of what should they be looking to do in the immediate short term so that they're set up well when we come out the other side of this, if it's in 2, 3, 4 years?
It's a great question. And obviously we've seen some tactical responses in terms of what program managers are doing with program extension, reducing threshold, which is the right thing to do in the short term. Co-brand is really interesting because what you've got is course co-brand spend is down. And if we look at what we had to do in Europe following interchange regulation, we had to re-engineer the total relationship with the bank. It's a profit-based, it's a JV. That's what these new arrangements are. They're JVs. And all right, American Express is still holding out and it's still got premium economics. If you haven't got premium merchant economics, you need a JV. Now, that JV means that every revenue element that's part of that overall P&L, bank P&L in particular, is shared. Now, if we look to what happened at the end of the banking crisis, funny enough, airline co-brand bad debt, it's certainly in my experience, hardly moved. So the net write-offs were tiny. So where American Express, for example, in 2009 provided 10% as a loss provision, it's incredible for a premium network. It didn't, in the end, it wrote a lot of that back. It didn't, I think it wrote off 7%. The airline co-brands had less than 1% less than 2% bad debts, not miles away from the 1% you normally get. Right. Why am I mentioning this? Because actually, if you are in a JV with your bank, the other good thing about what happened in 2009 is that more members extended payment. So airline members extended payment more, generating more income to the banks, but the debts weren't bad. And of course, the margins are huge on borrowing, particularly if you've got low debt. So what you've suddenly got is the banks, ironically, were making a ton of extra profit they weren't expecting to make, offsetting the lack of spend. So if you're in the US, where pretty much your income is based on miles issued, points issued, you're screwed at the moment. Whereas the bank are actually going to start enjoying, potentially, if it's the same response in terms of potential bad debt going forward, you're not going to necessarily going to be seeing a big, massive write-offs. So the banks are going to be whole more than the airlines, you could argue. So why not renegotiate the whole deal now? Even if you're not at the end of the contract, start talking now about this total relationship. How can we link the co-brand to a better through the airport onboard experience? How can we link the value of customers that carry co-brands in terms of how we talk to partners differently to get them to invest? Because surely we all want these customers. And if we create total packages for these customers, there's an economic incentive, you could argue, as I've already set out high level in terms of what drives the economics of the co-brand. and to hedge yourself in future against future problems, but to recognize you are going to be in a lower share of wallet environment. So make the wallet itself bigger and go for a bigger piece of that new bigger wallet that you could have dreamed of before. And you can do that by taking some of the great lessons that have been learned. For example, the BA Exec Club program, how you use surprise and delight in a really clever way. So when you do fly, something probably will happen to you. How can we take lessons learned from people like Amazon Prime in terms of how they use subscription? And how can we take lessons learned in terms of the economic reality facing low interchange markets that have changed the way they work with co-brands? And co-brands are the biggest issuers of airline points, full stop. Other ones are big, but they're not that big. And then you've got other ancillary opportunities within the program itself. So buy miles, for example. If I buy miles, airlines make super margins out of buy miles. They tend to be bought for a redemption to top up. They tactically get bought when there's a big promotion, but then they get vested, so it's not necessarily diluting customer airline flight revenue. Buy miles is a great example. As online shoppers, how do we take that transaction and create something extra for the customer? And how do we maybe even transfer that into what partners deliver? So it's an exciting time if you can get your head around this. But of course, the ones that are going to win on this are the ones that have already got more developed partner businesses and frankly have got leadership, airline loyalty leadership that is as near as the top table in the airline as it can be. Because if you're reporting into, no disrespect, men, the marketing director or the digital director, and you're the loyalty program, you're not necessarily going to get to the right place. And maybe the big idea to come out of this, or the big reaction, is let's elevate where it hasn't been, and it has been a lot. But let's elevate loyalty to where it should be, is on the board.
No argument for me there, Alan. But I mean, that's obviously a fantastic set of insights. I agree wholeheartedly with all your sentiments there. We are at time, so I want to thank you. Thank you for your time. I know it's probably beer o'clock there for you, although I think probably
Tuesday. Tuesday's not a good day for it.
Tuesday's not a good day
this week.
Time for you this afternoon. Unfortunately, Jason, we couldn't get the connection to work for Jason there, but we will follow up with a Q&A on Travel Data Daily in the next day or two. So we can get Jason's thoughts on the topics we covered today. Alan, thank you so much for your time, your insights, your wisdom, your experience.
My pleasure. Sorry for going on a bit.
No, please. I would encourage everybody to sign up for our future webcast. Next week's topic is with Mark Ross Smith. And what can airlines do with loyalty data? It's going to be a fascinating one. Make sure you sign up. Follow the Loyalty Summit channel on LinkedIn and loyaltysummit.com for the replay of today as well, which will be up in a day or two as well. So, Alan, once again, thank you. Can we have you back on in a future webcast?
Yeah, great. Love to. I mean, my diary is looking pretty good at the moment.
Yeah, you're not going to be out of your home office anytime soon.
Yeah, funny enough, airline consulting is not hugely in demand at the moment. I don't know why.
Terrific. Alan, look, thanks again for your time. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Sorry about some of the technical difficulties at the beginning, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks again.
Cheers, David. Thank you.